What would you do if a $5 million opportunity vanished in a heartbeat? Gone, erased, wiped out, because of a single mistake. Imagine all the lights, cameras, the hum of anticipation, and then nothing. That's exactly what happened on a Hollywood set that should have been nothing short of perfection. And at the center of it all was Meghan Markle. Yes, the Duchess-turned-actress, whose every move is dissected, debated, and broadcast to millions. But this time, the world wasn't just watching. It was about to witness one of the most dramatic, behind-the-scenes moments in recent Hollywood history. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all started months ago, when whispers began circulating in industry circles that Meghan had landed a cameo that was more than just a paycheck. This wasn't a small indie scene or a background walk-on. This was a $5 million cameo, the kind of opportunity that could define a comeback, re-establish Hollywood credibility, and make the tabloids scream with envy. Her name alone was enough to guarantee headlines, but the money, the exposure, and the sheer scale of the project made this role practically untouchable, or so everyone thought. The story matters now because, in an era where every celebrity misstep becomes viral content within seconds, Meghan's latest on-set meltdown isn't just a personal embarrassment. It's a spectacle that has Hollywood insiders whispering, agents panicking, and fans demanding answers. What happened here isn't just about forgetting lines. It's about high stakes, perfectionism, and what happens when the worlds of royalty and Hollywood collide in a pressure cooker that no one could have fully prepared for. Picture this: cameras rolling, sets polished to the last detail, crew members perched in every corner like hawks, and Meghan, dressed in an outfit designed to make headlines, ready to walk in and deliver a scene that would be remembered forever. Every director dreams of this moment. Every actor fears it. And on this particular day, all the elements were set for something remarkable or catastrophic. Jason Orley, the director in charge, is not a man known for patience. If perfection is demanded on set, Jason doesn't just ask for it. He enforces it with a relentless precision that borders on the ruthless. Actors who faced his scrutiny before describe him as a man who sees mistakes before they happen, who notices hesitation, stumbles, and misread lines with uncanny accuracy. And now, Meghan Markle, known for her poise in public appearances, but also her sometimes nervous on-set demeanor, was about to find herself under his laser-focused eye. As she rehearsed in the hours leading up to her scene, Meghan had been meticulous. Every word had been memorized, every gesture rehearsed. Yet, even the best-laid plans can go awry. And in Hollywood, there is no margin for error. A forgotten line isn't just a slip-up. It's a headline, a social media moment, a ripple that can grow into a tidal wave. The crew's whispers had begun. They say that Meghan had stumbled early on, fumbling lines that she had repeated a dozen times in private rehearsals. And while onlookers might have laughed it off, Jason Orley was not laughing. He is a man whose reputation for cutting scenes, or even cutting actors altogether, is legendary. And now, Meghan, who walked into the set with confidence and poise, felt that familiar flutter of nerves as cameras focused squarely on her. Have you ever been in a situation where the eyes of everyone in the room feel like they're piercing right through you? Imagine that feeling magnified 100 times. Every whisper, every camera click, every footstep amplified into a drumbeat of impending doom. That's the environment Meghan faced. And the $5 million stakes weren't just numbers. They were weighty, tangible, and crushing. The tension built as the cameras rolled. Meghan took her mark. The lights flared. Every crew member's attention was locked in. But then, the inevitable happened. She forgot a line. Not a minor line. A critical line that would anchor the scene, set the tone, and ensure the cameo would land perfectly. The mistake was small in isolation, but in Hollywood's unforgiving world, it was monumental. Jason Orley didn't flinch. He didn't even sigh. He just paused, eyes narrowing, scanning the room, scanning Meghan. There's a saying in Hollywood, the camera never lies. And Jason's camera, the one pointed at Meghan, was about to tell a story she never intended to be told. But here's where it gets interesting. Meghan, who had managed the scrutiny of tabloids, paparazzi, and global audiences for years, was now facing scrutiny in real time from the very people who controlled whether this $5 million moment would exist. Her reaction? Shock. Panic. A flurry of excuses and half-whispered apologies. Her face betrayed her, flushed, eyes darting, lips slightly trembling. The entire set could feel the tension crackling like electricity in the air. And the crew? They were caught in the middle, unsure whether to intervene, sympathize, or simply watch the spectacle unfold. A forgotten line had escalated into something bigger, something that threatened the entire scene, and potentially Meghan's reputation. But the most shocking part? The call that Jason Orley made next. It wasn't a snap decision. It was deliberate, calculated, and merciless. And it would ripple far beyond the confines of that studio. It would become Hollywood gossip, tabloid fodder, and social media fuel. What Jason did next would make headlines, stir debates, and, most importantly, leave Meghan reeling in a way few people had ever seen her before. Imagine standing there, knowing that in a few seconds, the opportunity you had been counting on, planning for, and expecting to shine in could vanish entirely. And that's exactly the position Meghan found herself in. The tension was unbearable, and every second stretched like a drawn-out drumbeat. The scene, the cameras, the audience, and the $5 million all hung in the balance. Now, think about this. We often hear about celebrity meltdowns, but how often do we get to see the story behind the meltdown? The stress, the anticipation, the silent calculations, and the split-second decisions that can make or break a career. This is that story. This is what it feels like when money, fame, and reputation collide under the unforgiving glare of a director's lens. And just when it seemed that the scene might survive, when Meghan had gathered herself, ready to deliver, ready to redeem the moment, the decision came. One word from Jason Orley, one simple action, and the $5 million cameo went up in smoke. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What does it feel like to hold $5 million in your hands and watch it slip away? Not literally, of course, but in every other way that matters. Opportunity, reputation, prestige, and pride. That's exactly what Meghan Markle was about to experience in a Hollywood studio that had been buzzing with anticipation for months. This was not just another cameo. This was a spotlight moment meticulously designed to catapult her back into the kind of Hollywood relevance that doesn't come around often. And yet, in a twist of fate, one small misstep threatened to erase it all. From the very beginning, the stakes were astronomical. The project was high-profile, the kind of production where every detail is scrutinized, every frame calculated, and every actor expected to deliver nothing short of perfection. Meghan had been promised more than just a paycheck. She had been handed a golden opportunity to remind Hollywood and the public alike that she wasn't just a former royal. She was a professional, an actress capable of commanding a scene, an entire film, even if it was a brief cameo. The setup had been months in the making. Meetings, wardrobe fittings, script rehearsals, camera blocking, and image consultations filled her days. Every gesture, every intonation, every facial expression was evaluated. There were notes on hand placement, eyebrow raises, subtle nods, details most people would never notice, but which in the world of $5 million cameos could mean the difference between a scene going viral and going into the editing room's trash bin. And yet, even with all the preparation, Meghan wasn't entirely relaxed. She had performed in front of cameras before, sure, but those moments didn't come with the same intensity. Here, the pressure wasn't just the craft. It was every eye on set, every whisper behind her back, and the knowledge that a director like Jason Orley doesn't forgive mistakes. Actors who had worked with him spoke of his near-legendary perfectionism, how he could detect hesitation in the tiniest micro-expression, how he could sense the slightest stumble in a line long before it hit the camera. It all came down to timing. Cameras rolling, lights on, crew poised, and Meghan stepping into a scene where everything was expected to flow like clockwork. The cameras didn't just record her, they scrutinized, captured, amplified. The tiniest imperfection, the smallest error, could be magnified into a narrative of failure, ridicule, or embarrassment. And in Hollywood, that magnification is relentless. As Meghan took her first steps onto the set, she was acutely aware of the cameras, of Jason's piercing gaze, of the crew ready to respond to every twitch and misstep. The set itself was a marvel of coordination, multiple cameras, lighting rigs, sound crews, costume assistants, all working like clockwork. The air was thick with anticipation. Every inch of space seemed to vibrate with expectation. And in the center of it all was her. The actress whose past, present, and future were all under the microscope. Have you ever felt that kind of pressure? Where every choice you make is a potential headline. Every pause or misstep could define the narrative. That's what Meghan faced. And as she stood at her mark, script in hand, she felt it. The weight of not just performance, but legacy, career trajectory, and public perception. The scene she was about to film wasn't long. It wouldn't take hours, but it carried weight. Every line mattered. Every reaction had to be precise. Every nuance had to resonate. And in the world of $5 million cameos, precision isn't just a goal, it's a requirement. Anything less, and the investment, the hype, and the credibility evaporates. Rehearsals had been tense, but nothing compared to the real thing. Here, on set, with lights burning, cameras rolling, and every crew member watching, the slightest error could trigger a domino effect. Meghan's lines, which she had practiced endlessly, suddenly felt heavier, loaded with a kind of gravity she hadn't anticipated. Her heart raced, her pulse spiked. She knew the eyes of the world were not literally on her yet, but they would be, once this scene aired, once it hit headlines, once the media began dissecting every second. Even before the first take, there were whispers. Crew members exchanged subtle glances. Some were sympathetic, understanding the pressure. Others were impatient, waiting for her to falter. And then, as the director called action, the room seemed to shrink around her. The lights, the cameras, the silence of expectation, it all became almost suffocating. The first few lines came out perfectly. Meghan's voice was clear, measured, confident. She hit every cue, every pause, every beat just as rehearsed. For a brief moment, it seemed that all the months of preparation were paying off. But then a slip, a line forgotten. Not a small aside, not a throwaway moment, an essential line that anchored the scene. The reaction was immediate, though not entirely visible. Jason Orley's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffened. A subtle sigh echoed through the crew, and the camera captured everything. Meghan's flinch, her lips pressing into a thin line, the tiniest flicker of panic in her eyes. The room, which had been buzzing with controlled tension, suddenly felt charged, almost electric. The error was minor in isolation, but catastrophic in context. And here's the kicker. Forgetting a line isn't just a mistake on set, it's a story. In Hollywood, where every microsecond of footage is dissected, where every actor's career hangs by a thread, a single error can cascade into a series of consequences no one anticipates. The cameras don't just record. You might as well say they immortalize failure, capturing it for an audience eager to judge, speculate, and gossip. As Meghan paused, struggling to recover, the crew leaned in, watching the unfolding drama with bated breath. Could she regain her composure? Could she salvage the scene? Or was the $5 million cameo about to vanish before her eyes? Every heartbeat, every measured breath, every subtle movement mattered more than ever. And then came the moment that would define the day. Jason Orley, calm, unyielding, calculated, made the decision that no one had expected but everyone feared. A single word, a slight gesture, an action invisible to most, yet momentous in its impact. That $5 million cameo, built over months of planning, rehearsals, and hype, was teetering on the edge of collapse. How would Meghan respond? Could she recover from this almost instantaneous disaster? Or was this a turning point that would change the trajectory of her Hollywood comeback forever? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever met someone whose reputation alone could make you second-guess every move you've ever made? Someone who commands a room without raising their voice, whose presence alone can turn confidence into nervous energy. That's Jason Orley. And on the day Meghan Markle's $5 million cameo was in jeopardy, he was the man at the center of it all. Jason Orley isn't just a director. He's an institution in Hollywood. Known for his meticulous attention to detail and an almost ruthless demand for perfection, his sets are both a sanctuary for artistic brilliance and a battlefield for anyone who falters. Rumors circulate about actors leaving his projects in tears, humbled, and sometimes humiliated. Yet, paradoxically, it's exactly this reputation that draws top-tier talent to him. Because if you survive Orley, you survive Hollywood itself. What makes him formidable isn't just his technical mastery. It's his psychological acuity. He reads people with an almost uncanny precision. Hesitation in an actor's voice, a micro-expression of doubt, even a slight misalignment in body language can be detected and corrected before it's ever captured on camera. For some, this is inspiring. For others, it's terrifying. For Meghan, it was about to become an almost unbearable pressure. The industry insiders who had worked with Orley before described him in near-mythical terms. You don't just act for Jason, one actor confessed. You anticipate him. You become almost hyper-aware of every nuance, every breath, because he sees things you didn't even know were there. Another recalled, I've had line coaches, rehearsals, months of prep, but Orley would notice a hesitation in my smile, a flicker of doubt in my eyes, and he'd call it out instantly. There's no hiding. And yet, despite his fearsome reputation, there was a method to his madness. Orley's scenes are legendary, meticulously constructed, and often hailed as some of the most powerful in contemporary cinema. The actors who thrive under his guidance credit him with bringing out a depth and authenticity in their performances that no other director could. But it's a double-edged sword. The closer you are to greatness under Orley, the more brutally exposed your flaws become. On the day Meghan stepped onto the set, the aura around Orley was palpable. He didn't shout. He didn't make dramatic gestures. He didn't even need to. The crew watched silently as he moved with precision, adjusting lighting here, repositioning cameras there, offering subtle guidance to the supporting actors. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, occasionally flicked toward Meghan. A simple glance, a tiny tilt of his head, that was enough to convey volumes. And Meghan, feeling the weight of every expectation, could sense it immediately. She had faced scrutiny before, of course. From the tabloids, from the public, from paparazzi lenses snapping constantly. But this was different. This was live, in front of a team whose every evaluation could make or break her career, and whose reactions were immediate and unforgiving. The pressure was tangible, almost suffocating. What many don't realize about Orley is that his intensity isn't just about control, it's about storytelling. He believes that every line, every gesture, every nuance is a brushstroke in a larger canvas. If one brushstroke is off, the entire picture loses its impact. And that's why the cameo Meghan was performing, which may have seemed simple to an outsider, was anything but. Every word had to resonate. Every pause had to carry weight. Every reaction had to read perfectly on camera. The irony of this situation wasn't lost on the crew. Meghan, a former duchess, accustomed to public adulation and scrutiny in equal measure, was suddenly a student in a classroom she couldn't escape. Every gesture, every line, every micro-expression was analyzed with a lens far sharper than any public gaze she had faced before. And Orley, calm and calculating, was the teacher nobody could cheat. But what made Orley's presence even more intimidating was the unpredictability. While his methods are precise, he never reveals exactly what he's thinking. One moment he may seem benign, almost encouraging. The next, a single expression or pause can indicate disapproval, so subtle, yet so powerful that the actor feels the weight of it immediately. It's a psychological chess game, and Meghan was suddenly in the middle of it, unsure whether the next move would be redemption or disaster. By the time Meghan stepped into the scene, the stakes were clearer than ever. Orley's eyes followed her every move, noting each step, each word, each breath. And while the cameras were technically rolling, they were only capturing part of the story. The tension in the room, the electric charge of anticipation, the silent calculations of a director who notices everything. None of that could be conveyed on film, but it permeated the set like a living thing. Now, imagine being in Meghan's shoes. You've rehearsed endlessly. You know your lines, your cues, your blocking. You've done everything to prepare. And yet, the presence of someone like Orley can make the most confident actor doubt themselves. One glance, one pause, and suddenly, you're fighting not just the script, but the weight of expectation itself. And this is where Hollywood's cruel irony comes into play. For every actor who thrives under Orley, there is another whose mistakes, however minor, are amplified, dissected, and immortalized. Meghan, with all her prior experience and public poise, was about to experience the unforgiving edge of this reality firsthand. The stage was set, lights blazing, cameras poised, crew silent but alert, Orley's gaze, unwavering, fixed upon Meghan. And then came the moment that would define everything. The moment a line slipped, a pause faltered, and the $5 million stakes became immediate, tangible, and terrifying. Would Meghan recover under this scrutiny? Could she deliver perfection under Orley's unyielding eye? Or was this a setup for an on-set disaster that would make headlines far beyond the studio? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever walked into a room knowing that every eye was on you? Every breath you took was measured, and one tiny misstep could change everything? That's exactly what Meghan Markle experienced on the day of her $5 million Cameo rehearsal. It wasn't just any rehearsal. This was the moment where preparation met reality, where months of planning and memorization collided with the unrelenting scrutiny of a director who noticed everything. And, as fate would have it, even the best preparation couldn't shield her from the pressure cooker she was about to face. The rehearsal started innocuously enough. Meghan arrived early, reviewing her lines in the car, running through gestures, facial expressions, and pacing in her mind. She had practiced this scene dozens of times in private, in front of mirrors, even with her assistant playing the role of other actors. She thought she was ready. But Hollywood isn't about thinking you're ready. It's about surviving the gauntlet of live performance under the microscope of people who have seen it all before. On set, everything was meticulously arranged. The cameras were positioned at angles calculated to capture both the grandeur and intimacy of the scene. Lighting rigs loomed like silent giants, ensuring every shadow, every flicker of emotion would be visible. Crew members stood strategically, ready to assist, adjust, and observe. The room itself was buzzing, not with noise, but with a tension that made the air almost electric. Everyone knew the stakes. Every whisper, every subtle exchange carried weight. Meghan's first take began smoothly. She delivered the opening lines with confidence, her voice clear, her gestures precise. The director, Jason Orley, nodded subtly, observing intently but saying nothing. It was all part of the psychological game he played, silent evaluation, watching, waiting. Every actor on set knew that this silence was more potent than any verbal critique. It allowed room for doubt to creep in. And that doubt was exactly what began to happen. Despite her meticulous preparation, Meghan felt her heart rate spike, her mind racing through lines and cues like a scrambling puzzle. She stumbled slightly on a word, correcting herself quickly, but it was enough to register with Orley. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold her. He simply watched, his expression inscrutable. That one small hesitation was magnified under his gaze, a tiny ripple in a lake that would soon become a wave. As the rehearsal continued, Meghan's anxiety grew. She tried to recenter herself, repeating the lines in her mind, imagining the cameras weren't there, visualizing success. But each attempt to regain composure only made her hyper-aware of the crew, the director, the cameras, and the stakes. The $5 million was no longer an abstract number. It was a living, breathing presence in the room, as palpable as the lights or the heavy set air. What made this rehearsal particularly unforgiving was the expectation of perfection. This was not an environment for learning, for mistakes, for casual missteps. Every movement had been analyzed in pre-production meetings. Every pause, every inflection, had been calculated for maximum impact. There was no room for error. One forgotten word or misaligned gesture could disrupt the entire scene, and in Orley's world, disruptions were not tolerated. The crew began to exchange glances, subtle shifts of attention that Meghan noticed even in her frazzled state. Some looked concerned. Others seemed almost gleeful at the prospect of witnessing a high-profile stumble. In Hollywood, the line between support and schadenfreude is razor-thin, and Meghan could feel herself teetering on it. Each breath she took seemed louder than the last, each word heavier than expected. Then it happened. A crucial line, a line she had rehearsed countless times, slipped through her memory. She paused, eyes widening, brain scrambling for the words she knew were right there, just out of reach. The room went quiet, The kind of quiet that amplifies mistakes in a way no rehearsal can simulate. Jason Orley's gaze sharpened, his jaw tightening subtly, but he didn't speak. He didn't have to. The tension was suffocating, the stakes now unmistakably real. Meghan tried to cover, improvising a slight gesture, hoping to buy herself a second. But Orley's camera captured it all, unflinching. In his viewfinder, the imperfection was not just visible, it was glaring. And the crew? They were frozen, caught between the desire to help and the knowledge that stepping in could disrupt Orley's meticulous orchestration. The weight of every eye in the room pressed down on Meghan, and the $5 million prize felt further away than ever. Have you ever been in a moment where everything you thought you knew, every skill you relied on, suddenly seems insufficient? That's what Meghan felt in that rehearsal. Every previous success, every past performance, seemed meaningless under the unyielding scrutiny of Orley and his crew. The line that escaped her memory wasn't just a line. It was the hinge upon which the scene, her performance, and potentially her $5 million reputation would swing. And the irony is almost cruel. Meghan, accustomed to commanding attention in royal circles, in front of cameras, and under public scrutiny, found herself paralyzed by the very thing she had mastered before. Public performance. Hollywood, with its exacting standards and relentless pace, had flipped the script. Here, her poise was not a shield, it was a target. The rehearsal dragged on. Each subsequent take, each repeated line, added layers of pressure. Meghan's anxiety became almost tangible, a living entity feeding on the stakes and the silence. She could hear the soft clicks of cameras, the subtle whispers of crew members, the rustle of scripts. And all of it combined to create an environment where every second felt stretched, every word weighed, and every mistake magnified. By the end of the session, Meghan was exhausted, emotionally drained, and acutely aware that her next opportunity on camera could be her last chance to salvage the scene. She had faced public scrutiny before, but this was different. Here, she wasn't just performing. She was navigating a high-stakes psychological minefield. And then came the final, devastating moment. As she approached the mark for what would be the last take of the rehearsal, she felt her mind betray her again. A line she had thought memorized vanished entirely. Her hand trembled slightly as she gestured, her voice faltered, and the room held its collective breath. Jason Orley's eyes were like a laser, cutting through the pretense, the nerves, the glamour. Every second of hesitation was magnified, captured, immortalized. Would she recover before the cameras rolled for the final take? Could she reclaim the performance that had slipped from her grasp? Or was this rehearsal a preview of the disaster about to unfold on set? A $5 million opportunity slipping irretrievably from her hands? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever been in a situation where the room feels like it's closing in on you, where every sound, every glance, every breath seems amplified tenfold? That's exactly what happened when Meghan Markle stepped onto the set for the main shoot of her $5 million cameo. The rehearsal had rattled her, but now it was real. Cameras rolling, lights blazing, crew members poised, and Jason Orley's unwavering gaze slicing through the tension like a scalpel. From the very moment she stepped onto the stage, the air was electric. You could almost hear the collective heartbeat of the crew, each member holding their breath, watching, waiting. This wasn't just a scene anymore. It was a test of endurance, skill, and composure. Every detail of the set, from the placement of props to the exact angle of a single camera, was designed to make even the most seasoned actors feel the pressure. And Meghan, despite her experience in public life and on-camera appearances, was not immune. The opening lines went relatively smoothly. Her voice was steady, her gestures deliberate, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed that the months of preparation were paying off. But in Hollywood, there are no fleeting moments. The pressure of the cameras, combined with Orley's meticulous attention, made every heartbeat a countdown. And then it happened. The line she had stumbled over during rehearsal resurfaced as a ghost, mocking her memory. Her lips trembled, her mind raced. She tried to recall the words, but under the glare of the lights and the scrutiny of everyone in the room, the simplest phrases suddenly seemed impossibly complex. Her pulse skyrocketed, her thoughts scattered, and the room, previously a blur of activity and anticipation, seemed to narrow, focusing entirely on her faltering performance. Jason Orley didn't react immediately. He stood there, arms crossed, eyes locked on Meghan, silently measuring her recovery. That silence, more than any shout or reprimand, is what makes Orley terrifying. He doesn't need to speak. His presence alone can make an actor's confidence crumble. Every twitch, every hesitation, every flubbed line is magnified under his scrutiny. And Meghan was acutely aware that this was happening in real time. The crew's reactions were subtle but telling. A slight gasp here, a barely audible whisper there. Some were sympathetic, understanding the human side of mistakes. Others, however, seemed almost gleeful, waiting to see how the high-profile actor would handle the pressure. It was as if the entire set had become a stage for observing the implosion of someone who had seemed untouchable. And Meghan knew it. She felt it in every fiber of her being. Every eye was on her. And the $5 million stakes weren't just numbers. They were a tangible weight pressing down on her chest. Each flubbed word seemed to stretch longer, each pause heavier. She tried to cover, adding gestures and facial expressions in an attempt to regain composure, but Orley's camera captured every slight tremor, every micro-expression of panic. There was no hiding from it. What makes this moment even more intense is the high-stakes nature of Hollywood sets. Mistakes are not just personal, they're public. The camera doesn't lie, and every take is recorded for posterity. In a $5 million cameo, one error can cascade into multiple problems. Reshoots, edits, even the potential loss of the scene entirely. And in this environment, Meghan's faltering lines weren't just a small hiccup, they were a threat to the entire production. As the takes continued, tension mounted. Orley's directions were precise, sharp, and unyielding. Focus, he would say, but the word carried more weight than it seemed. It wasn't just instruction, it was a command underlined by expectation, a reminder that perfection was mandatory. And the more Meghan struggled, the more the energy in the room shifted. Supportive crew members became anxious, other actors became tense, and the lights and cameras seemed to close in further. Have you ever felt that kind of pressure, where the room itself seems to judge every action? That's what Meghan experienced. Her training, her preparation, her poise, all of it was tested to the breaking point. And yet, she pushed forward, determined not to let the scene and her career fall apart. But the more she tried, the more the pressure built. Each line missed, each hesitation amplified, each glance from Orley's piercing eyes added fuel to an invisible fire. Her composure cracked in subtle ways, a sharp intake of breath, a momentary freeze, a tremor in her hands. These small cracks, magnified by the cameras, were more than just mistakes. They were signs of mounting stress. And in Orley's eyes, they were the difference between a scene that would shine and one that would implode. The crew, sensing the tension, began to whisper among themselves. Some speculated that Meghan was overwhelmed by the pressure of her first major Hollywood project since leaving royal life. Others wondered if the lines had been too challenging, too fast-paced, too complex for a cameo designed for simplicity. Yet the undercurrent was unanimous. Something monumental was about to happen. And then, the breaking point arrived. In the middle of what should have been a straightforward line, Meghan froze. The words that had been rehearsed dozens of times evaporated in the heat of the moment. The room went silent, as though collectively holding its breath, waiting to see how she would recover. Every camera angle captured the pause. Every crew member noticed the flinch, and Orley, silent as ever, studied her like a scientist examining a specimen. Her mind raced. Could she recover? Should she improvise? Would a stumble here mean the loss of the $5 million opportunity entirely? The pressure was not abstract. It was immediate, tangible, suffocating. And in that moment, Meghan faced a choice: rise above the scrutiny or crumble under it. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Imagine this: a $5 million opportunity, crafted to perfection, hanging in the balance, and then, in a single, irrevocable moment, it vanishes. That's exactly what happened on the set as Meghan Markle's rehearsal misstep collided with Jason Orley's exacting standards. This wasn't about a small error anymore. This was about a decision that would ripple through Hollywood, affecting careers, reputations, and every eye that had been watching her on that set. By the time the main take began, the tension in the room had reached almost unbearable levels. The cameras rolled, lights shone bright enough to make every bead of sweat, every micro-expression, every flinch hypervisible. Meghan, heart hammering in her chest, tried to find the rhythm she had practiced 100 times in rehearsal. But the echoes of the earlier slip-up still haunted her. Every word felt heavier, every gesture more scrutinized, and every blink seemed to be catalogued for imperfections. Jason Orley was in his element. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to direct aggressively. His presence alone was enough to make the set tense, focused, and alert. Every pause, every hesitation, every flub was immediately noticed. And as Meghan began her scene, the first line she stumbled on, one she had thought secured in memory, was enough to make Orley's patience snap. It happened fast. One silent command from him, a subtle shake of the head, a small but decisive gesture, and the fate of the scene shifted. The cameras continued to roll, but Meghan felt the change immediately. Something had altered the course of the shoot. The atmosphere, already thick with pressure, turned electric with the possibility of disaster. You might be wondering, how could one line, one moment, cost $5 million? But in Hollywood, especially under directors like Orley, perfection is non-negotiable. Every second of screen time is precious. Every take that falls short is not just a waste of money. It's a threat to the entire project, a potential headline, and a glaring spotlight on the actor who faltered. And Meghan, despite her public experience with scrutiny, was now experiencing the unrelenting reality of Hollywood in full force. The crew felt it too. Subtle whispers, quick glances, the shifting weight of expectation. It was as though the entire room was holding its breath collectively. Camera operators exchanged silent looks, lighting technicians froze in place, and assistants gripped clipboards with tension visible in every movement. This wasn't just a scene. It was a live examination of every aspect of Meghan's performance, amplified by stakes she had never faced in quite this way. Then came the blow. Jason Orley, in a move that sent shockwaves through everyone present, decided to cut the scene entirely. Not just a retake, not just a minor edit. The scene was gone. All the preparation, all the rehearsals, all the hype, it had been rendered irrelevant. The $5 million cameo, crafted for maximum impact and visibility, was effectively nullified. The emotional impact was immediate. Meghan's eyes widened in disbelief. Her mouth opened slightly, words caught in her throat. For months, she had envisioned this moment as a pinnacle, a career highlight, a triumphant return to Hollywood prominence. And now it had been wiped away, all in a fraction of a second. The room felt heavy with the silence that followed, a silence louder than any applause or critique could ever be. Hollywood is nothing if not dramatic, but even for a set accustomed to tension and high stakes, this was extraordinary. Crew members who had seen countless actors crumble under pressure were shocked by the rapidity and finality of the cut. Actors who had once thrived under Orley now whispered about how even someone as polished as Meghan could be undone by the director's unflinching standards. Have you ever watched someone's entire opportunity collapse in an instant and wondered what you would do in their place? That was the scene on set. Meghan standing frozen, $5 million slipping like sand through her fingers, with every eye in the room witnessing the fallout. And yet, despite the devastation, the cameras were still rolling, capturing a moment that would soon dominate industry conversations. What made this cut particularly brutal was not just the financial loss. It was the symbolic annihilation of expectation. For Meghan, this wasn't just about money. It was about credibility, control, and reputation. Every publicist, agent, and insider knew that a $5 million cameo represents more than just a paycheck. It's a statement. And now, that statement had been erased before it even aired. The irony is palpable. Meghan, accustomed to commanding attention on global stages, suddenly found herself at the mercy of a single, precise decision. Orley didn't just cut a scene. He cut into her professional momentum, into her carefully curated image, into the narrative she had built around her Hollywood return. Every heartbeat, every flinch, every slight tremor in her delivery had been magnified, and the consequence was absolute. The whispers began immediately. Crew members speculated on what went wrong. Fans would later dissect leaked footage, and media outlets started drafting their headlines even before Meghan had left the set. This wasn't just a personal embarrassment. It was a public spectacle in real time, and Meghan was at the center of it. And as she stood there, absorbing the shock of the cut, the realization hit her. This $5 million opportunity, this pivotal moment she had envisioned for months, was gone. Not delayed, not postponed, but gone, rendered invisible in the editing room, erased from the narrative, and replaced with silence. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever felt the ground vanish beneath your feet, the air thicken, and the world narrow down to a single, crushing moment? That's exactly what Meghan Markle experienced the instant Jason Orley's decision landed. The $5 million cameo was gone, erased, obliterated, and the room was heavy with tension, like a storm waiting to break. And in that silence, Meghan's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. At first, it was subtle. A tightening of her jaw, a sharp intake of breath, the way her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her script. But the crew, seasoned professionals accustomed to Hollywood highs and lows, could feel the energy shift in the room. Meghan, usually poised and in control, was now visibly shaken. Every step she took, every blink of her eyes, betrayed her rising panic. It started with whispered protests. "This isn't fair," she muttered, not loud enough for everyone to hear, but audible to those closest. Her voice, typically calm and measured, trembled slightly, carrying a mix of disbelief and frustration. Months of preparation, meticulous rehearsals, and strategic positioning, all gone in a heartbeat. And worse, erased in front of a room full of witnesses. The breakdown escalated quickly. Meghan's breathing grew heavier, rapid and uneven. Her hands moved with frantic energy, flipping through the script pages, trying to anchor herself. Yet nothing seemed to help. Orley remained unyielding, his expression unreadable, silently observing every reaction. The crew watched, a mix of sympathy and caution, knowing better than to intervene too overtly. In Hollywood, a director's decisions are final, and stepping in could be worse than doing nothing. Tears threatened to spill over. Meghan blinked rapidly, fighting to maintain her public composure. She had faced public scrutiny before, the tabloids, the press, the paparazzi, but this was different. This wasn't speculation or rumor. This was immediate. This was direct. This was her dream moment, evaporating in real time under the unflinching gaze of one of Hollywood's most exacting directors. And the emotional layers didn't stop there. The frustration wasn't just about the lost money. Sure, $5 million was substantial. But it was also symbolic. This cameo represented validation, professional acknowledgement, a public statement that Meghan Markle, former royal, former global icon, could still command attention, still perform at the highest level. The cut wasn't just financial. It was existential, striking at the core of her professional identity. In that moment, Meghan lashed out, not physically, but with words, whispers, and muttered complaints. "I practiced this endlessly," she said, a mix of indignation and desperation. This was perfect. Her voice trembled, echoing faintly against the set walls, her frustration spilling over. It was raw, unfiltered, a glimpse of vulnerability rarely visible in her carefully curated public image. And then, the unthinkable happened. She approached Orley, attempting to argue her case, to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage. "Jason, you don't understand," she began, her tone urgent. "I can do this. I can fix it. Just give me another chance." But Orley, calm and precise, shook his head ever so slightly. One motion, subtle but firm, conveying everything without uttering a word. The scene was done. Finished. No retakes, no second chances. The reality hit like a hammer. Meghan's professional training, her public poise, her decades of media experience, none of it mattered in that instant. She was human, fallible, vulnerable. And the $5 million, the pinnacle of opportunity, was gone, along with the control she thought she had over her narrative. The crew watched, riveted and silent. Some were sympathetic, understanding the pressure of performing under an unrelenting director. Others were almost gleeful, witnessing a high-profile actor experience the same crushing vulnerability that many newcomers face. And yet, no one spoke. The room had shifted, becoming almost ceremonial in its intensity, a theater of human emotion, poised on the edge of a catastrophe. As Meghan attempted to regain her composure, her internal dialogue became frantic. What would the media say? What would Hollywood insiders think? How would this affect my next projects? The weight of expectation, both self-imposed and externally projected, pressed down like a vice. She could feel her career trajectory teetering, her reputation balancing on a thin thread. And yet, amidst the chaos, a flicker of determination remained. Meghan, despite her breakdown, wasn't ready to surrender completely. There was fire in her eyes, a spark of defiance that hadn't been extinguished. She had faced public judgment before and survived. Surely, she could navigate this storm, rebuild, and reclaim her narrative. But first, she had to survive the immediate fallout. Direct questions echoed in the room and in the audience's mind. What would you do if everything you worked for evaporated in a single decision? Could you hold it together, or would the pressure break you? Hollywood is a place of scrutiny, pressure, and unforgiving standards, and Meghan was learning that lesson the hardest way possible. Yet, the drama was far from over. The cameras had captured everything, every flinch, every tremor, every whispered protest. In the days to come, this footage would become currency, clips dissected by gossip blogs, Twitter storms, and insider commentary. The public would see only fragments, but the reality of the moment, the intensity, the breakdown, the human vulnerability, was something no one would fully grasp. And the most shocking part? Meghan's meltdown wasn't just personal. It had begun to ripple across the entire production, affecting crew morale, co-star focus, and even Orley's approach to the remainder of the shoot. What seemed like a private disaster was now a public spectacle, amplified in real time by the microcosm of a set that operated like a pressure cooker. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. When word of the $5 million cut and Meghan Markle's on-set meltdown leaked, the reaction was immediate, intense, and, in true Hollywood fashion, merciless. News spreads fast in Tinseltown, and this story didn't just trickle, it exploded. From gossip blogs to entertainment news networks, from Twitter threads to Instagram stories, everyone wanted a piece of the drama. And at the center of it all was Meghan, the former Duchess turned Hollywood actor, whose every move is already under the microscope. It began quietly at first. Rumors circulated among insiders. The scene had been cut. Meghan had forgotten her lines. The atmosphere on set had been tense. These whispers, like sparks in dry brush, ignited quickly. Soon, bloggers with insider connections were posting exclusive details about what had happened. Photos of the set, glimpses of the crew, and subtle hints about Meghan's emotional state fueled speculation. The internet, hungry for scandal and drama, devoured every fragment. Social media exploded. Fans and critics alike jumped into the fray. Some defended Meghan, pointing out the extreme pressure she was under and her previous successes under the spotlight. Others were quick to criticize, painting her as unprofessional or overhyped. Memes appeared almost instantly, exaggerating the moment of her flub and the subsequent meltdown. Each post, each retweet, each comment became another layer of scrutiny, adding weight to an already unbearable situation. Hollywood insiders were buzzing too. Agents, publicists, and fellow actors debated what the cut meant. Some suggested this was a minor hiccup, a director exercising his well-known exacting standards. Others whispered that it could be the beginning of a very public career setback, especially given Meghan's history of polarizing public opinion. And while speculation was rampant, one thing was clear: this was no ordinary cameo cut. It was a story that would dominate industry chatter for weeks. The irony of Hollywood's reaction was sharp. Meghan had spent years navigating public scrutiny, royal obligations, and global media attention, but this was different. Here, the judgment wasn't filtered through diplomatic protocols, nor cushioned by royal security. This was immediate, personal, and inescapable. Her mistakes were captured on camera, witnessed by peers, and analyzed by the public in real time. There was nowhere to hide. As the news spread, PR teams scrambled. Meghan's team worked feverishly to manage the narrative, crafting statements and controlling leaks, attempting damage control in a high-stakes, fast-moving environment. They emphasized her professionalism, her dedication, and her commitment to the craft. They highlighted her previous successes and downplayed the severity of the cut. But in Hollywood, even the most polished PR effort can't erase the spectacle of a meltdown captured on set. The media coverage intensified. Entertainment news outlets ran stories dissecting the scene, the director, and Meghan's performance. Headlines screamed dramatic phrases. Meghan's $5 million cameo vanishes. Royal meltdown on Hollywood set. Jason Orley cuts Meghan's scene after line flub. Each headline added pressure, amplifying the sense that this wasn't just a small incident, but a seismic event in celebrity culture. Meanwhile, Hollywood peers reacted quietly but pointedly. Some expressed sympathy, understanding the immense pressure of performing under Orley's watchful eye. Others, however, were less charitable, viewing the mishap as validation of whispers and rumors they had heard about Meghan's work ethic and temperament. Conversations in private studios, over lunch tables, and during after-parties turned to speculation about the implications for her career, the project, and her standing within the industry. Social media played a particularly ruthless role. Clips and stills from the rehearsal began circulating, sometimes out of context, exaggerating her flub and meltdown. Hashtags trended, fan reactions were divided, and countless threads debated whether the cut was deserved or excessive. The intensity was magnified by the fact that Meghan is no stranger to public attention. The audience wasn't just casual viewers. They were critics, loyalists, skeptics, and entertainment aficionados, all weighing in simultaneously. It wasn't just online, either. Traditional media picked up the story, broadcasting it on television, dissecting every angle. Analysts debated what the cut meant for Meghan's Hollywood prospects. Would she rebound, or had this incident created a permanent blemish on her resume? Some speculated that her royal past added extra scrutiny. After all, every mistake she made was compared to a standard of perfection that few could meet. Behind the scenes, the production team faced pressure too. Crew morale, already strained by the intensity of filming under Orley, was affected by the public's reaction. People who had witnessed Meghan's meltdown firsthand felt the added weight of knowing it was now fodder for gossip columns, social feeds, and viral videos. The set, which had been tense before, now carried a lingering sense of embarrassment, anxiety, and anticipation about what might happen next. And in the midst of it all, Meghan herself was grappling with the fallout. She had faced scrutiny before, but this was immediate, unfiltered, and magnified. The cameras had captured everything. The public had seen it, and the narrative was no longer entirely in her control. Every reaction, every meme, every news headline chipped away at the carefully constructed image she had cultivated, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, and frustrated. Directly in her mind was the question, how do you recover from a public mistake of this magnitude? How do you rebuild when every misstep is amplified, every line forgotten is a headline, and every emotion is analyzed? For Meghan, the answer was not clear. And yet, amidst the chaos, determination remained, a glimmer that she would not allow this single incident to define her career. The reactions weren't limited to just gossip and media. Influencers, fans, and Hollywood commentators began speculating about the behind-the-scenes dynamics, suggesting tension between Meghan and Jason Orley, hinting at deeper conflicts, and questioning whether this was a one-time mishap or indicative of broader professional challenges. Social media, in particular, became a whirlwind of commentary, memes, and speculation, further amplifying the incident far beyond the walls of the studio. The irony was almost unbearable. Meghan, someone who had navigated the intense scrutiny of global media for years, now faced a microcosm of that pressure concentrated on one tiny, high-stakes cameo. The financial loss, while significant, paled in comparison to the reputational stakes, the public narrative, and the emotional toll of being observed and judged so mercilessly. And yet, for all the chaos and scrutiny, the drama was far from over. As the story spread, as gossip and speculation reached fever pitch, a private message emerged, one that would shift the narrative, complicate alliances, and reveal a hidden layer to the $5 million catastrophe. It was a message that few would see coming and one that would dramatically affect Meghan's next steps. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever received a message that changes everything? One text, one notification, and suddenly the world you thought you understood is upside down. That's what happened to Meghan Markle shortly after her $5 million cameo imploded. Just when she was grappling with the humiliation, the emotional exhaustion, and the media frenzy, a private message appeared, sent directly from Jason Orley, the man who had just erased her scene from the project. And this text wasn't just a casual note. It was a bombshell. Meghan's phone buzzed quietly on the edge of the set. At first, she almost didn't notice it, too consumed by the weight of the moment, too focused on processing the fallout. But then the screen lit up, revealing a message that made her pause mid-breath. It was from Jason Orley, the director whose reputation for precision and ruthlessness had already made her tremble earlier in the day. Her thumb hovered over the screen as she opened it, a knot forming in her stomach. The message was deceptively calm. It didn't scream anger or berate her for the mistake. It simply read, "We need to talk. Meet me in my office now. No one else." Just 9 words, but each carried weight. It wasn't a threat exactly, but it was an ultimatum. And in Hollywood, where the power dynamics between director and actor can define careers, this was as close to a threat as you could get without saying it aloud. Meghan's mind raced. Could this be an apology? A chance to salvage her scene? Or was it something far more ominous? She felt a surge of anxiety as she realized she had no choice but to follow the directive. Walking down the corridor toward Orley's office, the quiet hum of the studio felt deafening. Each step seemed louder than the last, each heartbeat echoing the uncertainty of what awaited her. When she entered the office, Orley was seated behind a massive mahogany desk, his posture calm and composed. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old wood, with the muted glow of a desk lamp illuminating the director's unreadable expression. Meghan closed the door behind her, suddenly acutely aware of every small detail. The slight tilt of his head, the exact placement of his hands, the way the silence stretched before he spoke. Jason didn't waste time. "Meghan," he said, voice steady but firm. "I know what happened on set. I saw the flub. I saw the hesitation. But I also saw something else. Potential." Meghan blinked, caught off guard. Potential? After everything, he was talking about potential? Her chest tightened, emotions swinging from disbelief to cautious hope. I don't understand," she stammered. "The scene, $5 million gone. How is that potential?" Orley leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You misstepped, yes. You froze. But that's not the whole story. You have a presence, a charisma that's undeniable. The problem isn't you. It's how you're approaching the craft under pressure. And right now, you're reacting to the wrong things." Meghan swallowed, her mind trying to reconcile the frustration she felt with the unexpected tone of his words. She had expected anger, reprimands, maybe even public humiliation. But here he was, analyzing, dissecting, and offering insight instead of fury. Yet beneath the calm, there was an unmistakable edge, a silent warning that this conversation could easily turn hostile. Then came the real shock. Orley's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it briefly. "This," he said, nodding toward his device, "is what you need to understand. In this industry, one misstep can cost you millions. But the bigger issue is perception, narrative, and how you respond when the world is watching. That's where your next move matters most." Meghan felt a shiver run down her spine. He was talking about the $5 million not just in monetary terms, but in terms of image, influence, and power. This wasn't merely a cameo. It was a test of resilience, adaptability, and strategic thinking. And Jason, in his quiet, controlled way, was laying bare the stakes. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I didn't cut the scene to humiliate you. I cut it because perfection matters. And you have the ability to deliver it, if you can learn to control the chaos, inside and outside the set." For a moment, Meghan was silent. The anger, frustration, and shame battled against a flicker of clarity. Could she take this as a lesson? Could she turn the catastrophe into an opportunity? Her pulse raced as she considered the implications. One wrong step, one miscalculated response, and the narrative could spiral out of control. But one right move, and she could reclaim not just the scene, but her reputation. Orley's text, now fully contextualized, wasn't merely a message. It was a roadmap, a challenge, a psychological gauntlet. He had set the stage not just for her performance, but for a test of endurance, strategy, and professional composure. And Meghan knew, deep down, that what happened next would define how Hollywood viewed her, not just as a former duchess, but as an actress in her own right. As she left his office, the corridors of the studio felt different. The weight of the cameras, crew, and lights pressed on her shoulders, but so did a new sense of focus. The $5 million loss still stung, the public scrutiny still loomed, but now there was a path forward, one fraught with risk, but also opportunity. She had been humiliated, yes, but the potential for redemption, for reclaiming control of her narrative, was tangible. And yet, even as she walked back toward the set, Meghan couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the message, the text, and the confrontation were just the beginning. There were players in this game she didn't fully understand, consequences she hadn't yet considered, and a public hungry for scandal. One misstep here, one miscalculation there, and the $5 million seen, and perhaps more, could be permanently lost. The lesson was clear. In Hollywood, every action is magnified, every misstep amplified, and every private message carries weight that can either save or destroy you. Meghan now had the roadmap, but would she follow it wisely? Or would the pressures, the cameras, and the expectations crush her before she could reclaim her moment? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming.